Hello guys. So this is the circulatory system. So we're going to be looking at the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood as we go through this. So hopefully you can follow along a little bit and this will all work well and good for you. So you should have your sheet on you. If you were absent this day, then this video recording can kind of help you go through and answer these questions. So pause it as you need. So the circulatory system essentially is sometimes it'll be called the cardiovascular system, sometimes it's the circulatory system. Essentially, it's the transport system, and it really has four main functions, and they all center around this idea of transport. You're going to also see that it is closely tied to the respiratory system, which we will do next after we're done with this one because they really tie together. So the main functions are it transports oxygen and carbon dioxide. So it's going to move oxygen to your body cells, which are needed for cellular respiration, and it's going to remove waste products like carbon dioxide, which it comes out of cellular respiration, which you should have learned in Bio A. It also helps distribute nutrients and transport waste, like we said, between the body cells and the lungs and all over. It also plays a role in maintaining body temp, and it also will help circulate hormones, which we'll talk about when we do the endocrine system. So like I kind of said in class today, you'll notice that a lot of these body systems are very much connected, as not, one of them really works independently. They all kind of work in conjunction. So the human body system is a closed circulatory system like most vertebrates. So, a lot of birds and stuff like that, mammals, they all have this closed, which means the blood does not leave this kind of pathway you're going to learn about, which is essentially the heart to the body through arteries, goes through capillaries where the exchange with the cells happen, and then veins bring it back to the blood. When someone bleeds out, what they're really saying is this closed system has actually been opened up and they're losing blood out of this system. So therefore the body isn't receiving the oxygen that it needs, the nutrients that it needs. Body temp is going to be thrown off. Waste isn't getting removed. Very bad. Gets very bad very quickly. So the heart pumps the blood into these large vessels, which branch into smaller ones, which lead to the organs. And then exchange at the cells, we're going to talk about, really takes place through diffusion, which we'll talk about when we do respiration. Okay. There are two main parts to the circulatory system. You have your pulmonary circuit and your systemic circuit. The pulmonary is named for the fact that it goes to the lungs, which is your pulmonary system. The pulmonary circuit essentially goes from the heart, and the heart is going to pump blood to the lungs where gas exchange takes place, which we'll talk about in the respiratory system, and then the blood returns to the heart. The systemic system then is where the heart is going to receive the blood from the lungs, and it's going to be pumping the blood out to the body to deliver the oxygen and nutrients to your cells, and then return that blood back to the body, which is now lacking oxygen and carrying a lot of the waste. In most diagrams, they'll use blue and red, where blood really, it's a myth that blood is ever really blue. It's just different tints of red depending on the oxygen level. But they tend to use red to indicate blood that is high in concentration of oxygen, and then blue that is low in concentration of oxygen or lacking. But your blood will always have some oxygen content in it. So if you kind of follow this, it makes sense when you do the heart thing of saying at any given time, half of your heart is full of blood that is high in oxygen because it comes back from the lungs where it picked up oxygen, and then it's going to be pumped out to your body where it's going to drop off the oxygen and pick up waste. So now that it dropped off the oxygen, it's going to come back low in oxygen where it needs to be pumped back to the lungs to be re-oxygenated again. Okay, and this is just another example of that idea of the pulmonary is from the heart to the lungs and back, And then your systemic is getting blood to your head and your lower body and back again to be reoxygenated. All right, so there are three main elements or parts to the cardiovascular system or the circulatory system. These involve your heart, which is on your sheet would be A, your blood vessels, which is B, and the blood itself is C. Those are the three main elements to this system. So let's start with looking at the heart. The heart is cardiac muscle tissue. It's the strongest muscle tissue you have. It is only found in the heart. It's very highly interconnected, very strong. It is the muscle in your body that legitimately, from the time you were born, even before you're born, pumps or works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your entire life, pumping blood to get oxygen to your cells and remove waste. There are four chambers. So you have two upper chambers, which are called the atriums or atria. These are actually smaller, and they are smaller mainly because they don't need to pump as far. When the atria pump, they are simply going to pump the blood from the top chambers, which are receiving blood from the body and the lungs, down into the ventricles. The right and left ventricles are the bigger, stronger. They have this way thicker walls, much stronger cardiac muscle, because these need to squeeze with enough force to push blood to your lungs and back, as well as to your entire body and back. So the ventricles have to be bigger and stronger because they have to generate more of a force to get the blood out to the body or the lungs and back, whereas the atria just kind of have to push them through this little valve from the top to the bottom. Now, when you listen to your heartbeat, it goes thud-bum, thud-bum. The first "the" are your atria squeezing to push the blood down. So these work at the same time. Now, once it pushes the blood down like this, then this valve is going to close. That's what allows blood to fill in the atria. The second thump are the two ventricles squeezing to push the blood to the lungs or out to the body. So as these push out to the body, it's like a domino effect. So this blood pushes the blood that is in, so from the aorta pushes the blood throughout the body, which then pushes the blood to fill back in the atria and so forth. So it's all kind of a domino effect. All right. So the heart, right, generates blood pressure, which then really pushes the blood through your body. It also plays a role in routing the blood, so it separates the pulmonary and systemic. It also ensures one-way flow because of these valves we're going to talk about. And like it said, it regulates blood supply to where it should. So like if you are doing exercise, your heart rate goes up, which then means it's going to pump harder and faster to deliver more oxygen and more nutrients to your cells and remove more of the carbon dioxide that's being made because of cellular respiration. So your heart rate will go up or down depending on what you're doing to meet this kind of demand of oxygen to your cells. All right. So what are these valves? You have different valves in the heart, and the valves really are there to prevent backflow. And these, when you do the handout, they'll kind of talk about them. They're named for where they are or how many flaps they have. So a tricuspid or a bicuspid means, does it have two flaps that are going to work like this, where they open to let it through and then close, or does it have three of them? The aortic is the one that connects to the aorta, and the pulmonary is the one that comes from this ventricle to there. The one thing I forgot to say real quick that's important is when you're naming these for the heart, you have to look at it from the viewpoint of the person, not from you. So the right atrium is not your right, it is the person's right-hand side. So if this heart was sitting in an individual, this would be their right arm or right side over here, and then their left arm over here. So when you're looking at the heart, at the front of the heart, you need to flip everything. So the right atrium and ventricle, the left atrium and ventricle. Okay, so there you go. And this is basically how it works. So when the atria squeezes, it's going to push the blood through, which opens the valve, and then those valves are going to shut so that when the ventricle squeezes, the force keeps this valve closed so it can only go through the next one. So all the valves kind of keep it as a one-way street where the blood can't back up. Okay, so then you need to do the handout for the heart activity where you're going to track the pathway through the blood and draw arrows and color some different parts. So please do that now. You can pause the video if you want to do it now or do it later. All right, so then you got your blood vessels. Blood vessels are kind of the network of tubes that the blood runs through. Okay, now I'll go back to that page, but your arteries and your veins are actually made of smooth muscle, and this smooth muscle can actually dilate and contract to control your blood pressure as well as how much blood is going out to your body at any given time. So if you are exercising, you're working out, they'll adjust depending on what they need. So these are some things you need to remember. So arteries branch into smaller branches called arterioles, but essentially arteries always go away from the heart, and they are usually high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide because they're leaving the heart to go out to deliver oxygen to the blood. Like I said, they're made of circular smooth muscle. The one exception to these rules are the pulmonary artery and vein. The pulmonary artery is the only artery that would be low in oxygen because it's taking blood away from the heart but to the lungs. And then the pulmonary vein would be the exception, but usually veins are going to bring blood back to the heart. The skeletal muscles that they run through, the contraction of your muscles when you move help to squeeze the blood back up to your heart from your legs and other stuff like that. They also have valves in them that will help keep the blood moving in one direction also. Okay, so the skeletal muscles, so these are high in carbon dioxide, low in oxygen because they're returning to the heart. Varicose veins come when these valves break and blood starts to pool in your legs, so then your veins stick out a lot and stuff like that. So again, when you look at this picture, blood's going to come from the heart through these arteries, branch smaller and smaller till they go into these things called capillaries. Now, capillaries are where you actually get the gas exchange. The gas exchange happens here, and then it'll branch back into bigger veins called venules, back into bigger veins, and eventually go back to the heart in that way. Okay, so that's a basic idea of how your arteries, veins make the systemic loop part. Okay, so part 3, and I only have about 2 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty quick, is made of your blood. Now, your blood is actually a connective tissue made of 4 main components. The blood first has this stuff called plasma. Plasma is all the liquid part of the blood. So it contains clotting factor, hormones, antibodies to fight off germs. This is where the carbon dioxide, oxygen, a lot of dissolved gases can be found at times. Also on the red blood cells, as you learned, a lot of your nutrients and waste can be in here circulating through your body. The second part are what are called erythrocytes, or you can just write them as red blood cells. This is what actually carries the oxygen. Okay, these only last about 120 days. They don't repair themselves. Your body's constantly making these in the red bone marrow in your skeleton. So you have your plasma, which is the liquid part, the red blood cells, which are carrying oxygen. Then you also have these leukocytes, which is actually, you can write white blood cells. These are the ones that really fight infections. These are made in your yellow bone marrow in the skeletal system, and you have lots of different types of white blood cells that all target different types of viruses and germs and anything else that gets in your body. So your white blood cells are really part of your immune system, or how you fight off when you get sick. The last part are called thrombocytes. These are your platelets. So just write platelets. Platelets essentially play a factor in blood clotting. So platelets, when you cut yourself, are what start to fill in kind of the cut, and they all stick together and kind of create a plug to try and keep you from bleeding out and dying. So these also are formed in the bone marrow. So you're going to notice a lot of your blood is actually formed in your long bones, like your thigh bone and your long arm bone up here, your humerus, that you'll learn about when we do skeletal, and that's where a lot of the parts of your blood are actually made. So hopefully this will help. You can also use your textbook to answer these up or see me. All right, thanks a lot.